All right. So another week 5. We're going to talk about credit. Before we get started, though, this may not affect, obviously it doesn't affect all the students, but for those of you who bought the textbook through the bookstore, my apologies. First off, I'm not trying to dodge the blame here, but I have nothing, zero to do with it. I wish I did have something to do with it so I could fix it, but I don't. Anyway, I know they keep referencing that you need to get a code from the instructor. First off, I wasn't given a code. I don't deal with those people. Trying to get them on the phone is impossible. I was going to meet face-to-face with a guy on Friday, but I believe he was sick or whatever happened, but that did not happen. But now we're pursuing it through different channels. But, it kind of relates to personal finance. When you give an entity, the bookstore in this case, a monopoly, don't expect good customer service. That's not something that, that they're compelled to do at that point because, well, they've got no competition. So anyway, if you can sense I'm a little frustrated, yeah, I am. And the fact that they're trying to say that it's got something to do with the instructor, no. And the fact that they're trying to, they actually had a code, but it was for a My Lab thing because they'd love to sell you a full suite of all these other tools where, it's an integrated program and costs, triple the price and the rest of it. I'm not doing that. And so anyway, it's a battle that I'll continue to fight, but my apologies to you as the student who's, actually trying to take this course. This is so far afield of the core mission of the university, which should be to instruct you. It seems like, anyway, not going to go off on the soapbox, but if they can't provide a textbook, we've got a serious problem. Okay, credit. So credit, credit, especially in personal finance, it's either your friend or your foe. I mean, this is what will kill people or will make them hugely successful. Rich people get rich on other people's money. If you're trying to do it all on your own money, and it's not a bad strategy, especially if you lack discipline and will get in over your head. But if you can use credit to your advantage and use credit for purchases, especially purchases that appreciate, don't depreciate, gain in value over time, it's smart, and that's how things are done. So it can be quite useful, but you have to make a conscious decision. And so, if we're talking good credit, bad credit, things like credit cards, they have a place, but to use them as a source of a loan or some sort of cash or that type of thing, other than for emergency uses that will be paid off in a month, that's going to be a problem. So anyway, provide funds by a creditor to a borrower that will be repaid with interest. So, and, you can actually say that zero interest if you're going to pay it back within that billing cycle if it's a credit card purchase. But again, that's kind of unusual. So they get wrapped up in installment, non-installment credit. The main thing that the most important factor that affects credit and the amount you're going to pay for it, in addition to your credit worthiness, your ability to pay it off, is the security. The lender, if they're loaning you money and it's just based upon your signature, if there's no collateral, if there's nothing tied to that asset, yeah, they're taking a pretty hefty risk. If it's tied to an asset such as a home, even a vehicle, where it's specifically identified in that loan statement, well, then you can expect a lower interest rate because that lender can make that loan with some security that if you flake out, they have recourse. They're not taking as much risk because the home repossession process is pretty well established, not typically a problem. And, as we know with, Repo Man and all that other stuff, repossessing vehicles is that's kind of a fairly streamlined process and legally not such a problem. So the lender can loan money with less risk. So this installment versus non-installment, yeah, if it's a loan that's tied to a particular item, like say, again, a car or a home, there's going to be a fixed payment every month, right? Whereas on other types of credit, like a credit card, for example, you can, pay a portion of the balance, and you can pay a little, you can pay it off, you can pay. So that's what they're getting into. Revolving, open-end credit, same sort of thing. And sometimes you'll see like a line of credit. It sounds impressive. It's just a loan, and it's probably a higher price loan because typically revolving credit or a line of credit is not tied to a specific asset, something that can be used as collateral. So, helping build a good credit score. Good credit score is important to a limit. Don't spend money trying to establish a score. In most cases, a good credit score will come to you if you pay your bills and you do things smartly. There are maybe things like some of your cell phone type contracts where you're going to get a phone anyway. That's a good way to build a score, or utilities. But to go out and make purchases because I'm going to try and build a score, no, not so much. We'll talk more about credit card agencies and stuff, but they serve a purpose, but that's who controls your score. So for most places, you enter in your Social Security when you're doing your Social Security number when you're making a credit application, and that gets them into the credit card bureaus, and we'll talk more about that. Eliminating the need for carrying cash or writing checks. Yeah, I mean, certainly and believe me, there's going to be, we're going to be motivated to try to use less cash because it's easier for merchants and it's easier for the government and all that stuff. And I'm not saying this is in your best interest not to use cash, but they're going to make it simpler and simpler. Yeah, and now, as you know, you can just tap with your card or do all sorts of automatic payments. But yeah, it is a little scary to give that sort of transparency, because if you use a credit card exclusively, like I pretty much do, when the government comes to figure out where you've been, what you've done, and all the rest of it, it's quite easy, and you're giving up a little bit of your I don't know if it's liberty, but certainly transparency. Disadvantages. So excessive spending, yeah, if you're somebody who's just going to go over the top, but again, it gets in this situation where it's expensive to be poor. I mean, the people, like I was mentioned in the last lecture where we're talking about money orders, if you're somebody who's unbanked, somebody who doesn't have a bank account, you're going to spend more in service charges and fees than the person with the bank, because everything's going to have these little small charges set up with it. Plus, if you don't have good credit, you're going to be paying a higher interest rate. But anyway, this goes beyond personal finance. This just is basic discipline. You have to learn how to control your credit. And believe me, I know, from selling stuff as a vendor, that people are much more. Well, they have much less reluctance to spend more than they should if they're using a credit card versus cash. And so, I kind of used to play. It was a little bit of a game. I was selling a lot of horse-related stuff, corrals and things like that. And some of these items, we're talking $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, for a typical order. And if it was already set, if they were going to spend, say, $2,500, and they would ask me, how would you like me to pay for it? Well, if it's set, I'd say, check or cash is great, because obviously they were big items. I didn't have any problem taking a personal check. I never got burned. Cash is good too, obviously, because there's no charges involved in that. But what I didn't want to do, and I offered to take credit cards, but I certainly didn't want to encourage it because I had to pay 3%. So if it's a $2,500 order, well, that's like $30 $30 per thousand, so whatever, up to about $70 or $75 on a typical order that is going straight to the credit card company. But if I could see the person wavering in terms of perhaps wanting to get more stuff and say, well, do you take a card? And it's like, and again, if somebody said they wanted to use a credit card, I would take it. I wasn't stupid about it. But if it looked like they're going to buy way more, you almost want to encourage them to, use the credit card, because they're going to spend, now that $2,500 order becomes $4,000 or $5,000, because they don't really associate a credit card with spending money. Whereas when it's cash, I mean, it's like you're prying it from their hands. It's much more difficult. They're fully aware that money is going. Check is somewhere in between. But anyway, so people do tend to spend more money when they're using credit. Large accumulation of debt. Yep. And if you're just making the minimum payment, this goes back to day one with those charts that show, how much interest you can earn. Well, in this case, that's how much interest you can pay. You can buy something, let's say it's a $500 item, but it's on sale, so I got to get it right now. And so you pay the $500, but by the time you paid it off on that credit card, you paid $750 or $1,000 for that item. So that great deal that you couldn't pass up is no longer such a great deal. Credit rights, yeah. People always claim that, it wasn't me, I'm a victim, they're predators, sure. It can happen. There can be bad information out there, and now, just like in our bookstore example, with AI and everything else, customer service is you need to spend a day trying to sort stuff out or deal with things. So if bad information gets into your credit, even the credit cards, but even worse into the credit bureaus, trying to clean that up, there have been some laws to empower you a bit to deal with the credit rating bureaus, and we'll talk about them. So impact of credit. So anyway, yeah, if you go through life without credit, especially without a credit card, it's going to be tougher and it's going to be more expensive. If you try to book an airplane without a credit card, I'm not even sure how you do that. Anyway, it's going to be more expensive. You're not going to be able to shop the deals, the rental cars, everything else. If you go up to a rental car and you don't have cash or you don't have a credit card, their hackles are up. They're number one, they're going to charge you a lot more, but they're very nervous why this person, it doesn't speak well to your financial, prowess if you don't have a credit card. So anyway, I'm not saying you have to use it, but maintain it. In most cases too, even with a rental car situation, you could secure it and do all that stuff with a credit card. But when you're going to settle it out, say, no, I'd prefer to pay in cash. And I think in most cases you could do it. But anyway, credit history, paying your bills. So yeah, and a lot of times, one way to build that is utilities, and I would include cell phones in that as well. But pay your bills on time. Credit insurance. Credit insurance is kind of funny. It's where you often see it is sometimes with credit cards, sometimes with certainly with home mortgages, and this is I don't know. It's just sort of disingenuous the way they pitch this, that this is there to help you. Well, for example, credit insurance on your mortgage, you'll sign some paperwork typically when you're getting a mortgage that will say, upon your death, if there happens to be some sort of accident, the mortgage would be paid in full. Okay, and we're going to provide this insurance to you. Well, ultimately, you're kind of buying a mini life insurance policy with that mortgage. You're paying for it. It's not going to be very much because the odds of somebody, especially a younger person, buying a house and actually dying, that's quite low. But if that worst case scenario happens, the mortgage company is very happy to know that mortgage is fully paid off, that they don't have to, wait for some whatever assets and all these other things to set, probate court stuff to. No, they just want the house paid off. They want their loan, paid off, and struggling with a grieving widow or whatever else that's the ugliness that's going to ensue trying to get that mortgage paid off. They don't want any part of that, so they will typically have a little insurance policy that's part of the loan, and it's all good. Whoever your survivors are, they will indeed own the home, but it's not free. I mean, even if they say, oh, there's no extra cost, well, if the mortgage company's paying for it, the mortgage company's a corporation. The money comes from somewhere. So, credit bureaus, there's 3 of them, primary ones, and they provide a necessary service. They're private institutions, money-making institutions. They sell your information. They maintain these databases, and the merchants, the vendors, the people who might be making loans, they pay. Sometimes you pay. Sometimes, like, for example, if you're getting a house, you might have to pay for your credit report, $50 or something. For other ones, you might, like when you're applying for a credit card, normally that they just absorb that cost, and they probably don't spend anywhere near $50 because they do it in bulk and they don't need as detailed of amounts. But later on, we'll talk about how to look at your credit report. And if you look at your credit report, there'll be some section in there where it says something about inquiries. And you'll notice that if you do have some inquiries through there, it might be Chase or Capital One or something, you'll notice it probably corresponds to the junk mail you're getting. When they say, oh, you're pre-approved for this credit card, they ran a credit check on you and decided, yeah, okay, we're going to go ahead and send them a credit card. But they use that. So the big 3, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, they've gotten more customer, down at the consumer level because they've realized that people, I don't know, it's just a generational thing, where it seems like the younger generations, and again, I sound like the old guy here, are maybe a little bit more paranoid about certain things and want to know what their credit score is and whatever. It's not something certainly to obsess about, But anyway, they've realized that people will actually pay a fee and subscribe to a service to get access to their credit score, just so they can have it. If you just call them up and ask for your credit score or went online, no, they're not going to give it to you because, hey, it's something they collected and they can sell it to you. If you go through some, NerdWallet or Credit Karma or something like that, and part of the deal when you sign up with them is, oh, we can get you your credit score. Well, keep in mind that you, as their customer, represent some sort of value to them because they're paying for that credit score. And if you're getting it for free, they're obviously, you're the thing being sold here. Your information, all your data when you sign up is going to be sold off to the other companies, which, again, it may be fairly harmless, but if you're very privacy minded, that may not be something you want to do. Free credit reports annually. So the way this works is there's 3 credit bureaus, and by law they have to give you a credit report. Now you notice it doesn't say free credit score. Again, that score is something that's a proprietary thing, and they don't have to give that to you. So again, the value of that absolute score, I don't worry about it too much. But it's also available through some of the credit cards they already have a business with. So, yeah, again, I'm being sold to a certain extent. But since there's 3 of those, if you really wanted to get a credit report every, say, 3 months, you could do it. 4 months, I guess, because there's 3 of them. The other thing is if you're denied credit, you can say, hey, I want to know why. And again, that would get you access to a credit report, and they send it to you. It's important to go through that stuff maybe once in a while, because sometimes you'll find, other information out there. You'll find extraneous stuff. You'll find that they have somebody else's data associated with your account. You'll find that, maybe you established credit when you were buying something. You didn't realize that you're not using it anymore, and you should close that account down. So anyway, just getting the credit report, though, can be a bit of a challenge, especially if you've been married and divorced. I mean, I've been divorced 13 years or something. When I go to get my credit report, it is difficult because they ask me these series of questions, and half of the stuff is not me. I don't even, my ex, I'm not in regular contact with her, let's say. And so I don't know. And they're asking me, have you ever lived at this address? You ever whatever? I'm like, none of these addresses are familiar to me. And so their information is pretty messed up at times. And so if I can get by the questions, I'll get in there and look at the report. But it's, anyway. Negative information. Yeah, if you declare bankruptcy, that is going to be on there. And you're saying, well, wait a minute. On a bankruptcy, I've been told all the information's wiped clear. Well, that speaks volumes. The fact that your credit information, he hasn't had any of this. Well, that, these people know. When they see gaps, it's not like you were just created at some point. If there's a significant gap, it points directly to a bankruptcy. So you're not really fooling anybody. Tax liens, sure, all that's in there. Accounts turned over to collection agency. So yeah. Now, if you get a thing from the utility company saying you're overdue or you're late or whatever, yeah, that hasn't gone to collection yet. There are collection agencies out there, and that stuff will generally get in there. But being a few days late is not going to typically affect your credit score. And for the most part, if it's a one-off deal, certainly call that company and say, and you could even be guilty completely. You're late. You forgot. You did it not intentionally, but anyway, if it's a once in a year kind of thing or once every couple of years, you'll typically get them to waive that whatever charge they put on you. Both open and closed accounts, yeah. And list of companies that have requested. So keep in mind, these are companies that are probably going to be soliciting you for credit. Now, one way to get your credit score to drop is, let's say you go out car shopping and you've got 700 credit score in the morning. You could knock that thing down below 600 by the afternoon if you run your credit at each and every car dealer. You make these people very nervous when you look like you're applying for a lot of credit from a lot of different places. In fact, I got a letter one time from a mortgage company, the company I had a mortgage with, saying something about, was there a problem? Did I have, something going on? Because they were concerned that I wasn't going to be able to pay off the mortgage because I was shopping around trying to get an equipment loan, and I had 4 or 5 different options, and they all ran my credit thing, and to them it looked like I was taking out loans all over town. They didn't know that none of these loans had gone to completion. In fact, I ended up not going with them. But because of that, I'd driven my score down. And anyway, they sent me a thing asking me if I wanted a loan, because at least they thought if I was going to take out another loan, I'd do it through that company and they could keep track of it. But anyway. So credit report, yeah, it's going to have all the information on it. It's much more interesting to look at your own stuff. So as part of this, and it's an assignment not to be handed in, do not send me your credit report, because obviously it has all kinds of details on it that you shouldn't be sending to me, but you shouldn't really be sending it to anybody. I mean, it should be handled securely, and putting it out there in an email or something, or you know, God forbid, Blackboard, probably not the most secure system. So when you're able to look at this, you know, report, do that, and then, you know, delete the file or do whatever, but don't keep it laying around, because it's got all of your information on. If you wanted to steal somebody's identity and you had a copy of the credit report, it's quite easy. So it's going to have different. The other part with the credit report is a lot of times you'll see the company names are not as clear. You know, here it says Macy's. I really doubt that Macy's a big department store. Yeah, they're still in business, I guess, but it would probably say Chase something, because they farm this stuff out typically to third parties, and so you may see companies in here that don't. You're like, I've never had an account with them. Well, yeah, that, you know, credit card you have with Gap or Old Navy or one of those guys, they probably have contracted with that other company, and so that's how it's looking. Credit score, so yeah, that numerical score. But it needs to be good, but it doesn't need to be perfect. And mine, you know, goes back and forth. And I sometimes, whatever, I could, I'm sure, trace down the reason why it goes up and down. But, you know, whether it's 800 or something or 700 or something, it doesn't matter. You know, like I say, they want to loan money to people who can afford it. They don't want to loan money to people who can't. So if you're at a position in life where you're not having to borrow money, yeah, that's when they want to loan it to you, because it's very little risk. But when you really need the money, it's tough to get a loan. Tough to get a cheap loan, especially. So, yep. Payment history, utilization, credit history, new credit. So that new credit, that's what was taking me down on the other ones. So I was looking at applying for a bunch of loans, different types of credit. So they also want to know how much you make, you know, for credit card thing. Generally, if you go to let's say you're going to Home Depot and you want to get one of their credit cards, because there's incentives, you know, the first day you can get whatever, 10 or 15% off on a purchase. So yeah, it helps to not have a credit card when you walk into Home Depot to do that, because it's only for new customers, right? So you go in there, you buy the appliance, and you go, you know, apply for the credit card at checkout, and you have to put in your annual income, and then you have to put in your Social Security, and through their Social Security they access all of this. And then you take home your item, you pay it off before you pay any interest, or if you have some extended thing, and then you cancel that credit card so that you're good to go for the next year. Because again, you don't want to have that credit card. You want to be a new customer. I've been a new customer at Home Depot especially, probably, I don't know, 10, 11 times. Basically once a year when I need an appliance for a rental place or this thing or my own home. You know, that's how you do it. Different scores, bureaus. So yeah, they get the information, but how they compile it, they don't always have the same scores. Yeah, so range 350 at 850, 600. 600 may not get you the best loan, but you can get to 600, you know, and at least be able to get credit cards and stuff. But you want to try and get a little bit higher. Correcting credit cards. So these guys, you can go in there, and if you find an error after looking at that report, yeah, you make it known that there's an error in here, and they have to set aside that information right then, and then if it ends up being true, it'll go right back in the report. Now, if you want to post some personal statement, go ahead. I think you're probably wasting your keystrokes, but you know. Anyway, improving your credit score. Yeah, just don't, you know, pay your cards. Destroy credit cards. I don't like open accounts. I don't think that is good advice, because sometimes little things will creep in there, and you haven't done a change of address, and also you find out you've got a credit card that's out there. Call creditors. I was driving down the road, and I got a text from Wells Fargo, saying that my credit card transfer of $5,000 was not approved. Well, I don't have an account with Wells Fargo, but I guess I did. I didn't establish it; it was established, in my name. But here, the guy was trying to do. He established a credit card as well. It was a guy in. It was a pretty intricate thing. I actually had the guy's name who had done it, and I mean, I wasn't that unique, but he definitely had all my info, and so you have to keep track of those things. There's a lot of scammers out there. So they're saying twice a year. Yeah, that's probably not a bad thing. Just look through there. It doesn't take long. Just see what's out there. See who's been looking at you. See if there's any deficiencies or any problems, and hopefully they're errors, and then you get those corrected. So not a big deal. So, probably over half. So that's why I say 600 is nothing to be too excited about. That puts you in the bottom 20%, basically. You should march that up a little bit. And then if you've got above 700, anything, I don't think you're going to have an issue getting credit if you're in those things. And if it teeters back and forth between the two, again, there's enough other things to worry about in life, like textbooks. So how do you get a credit report? If you go to Google and just say free credit report, you are going to get bombarded, but not with what you want. You are going to get all these people that are going to say, hey, here's your free credit with the credit score, all that stuff. It's free, but for some reason you need to give us your credit card. And you're going to sign up for this trial subscription, but, of course you can cancel, which you'll forget to do. And then that's how they want you to do it. So what you need to do is you need to go to this ftc.gov and get it through that means. And again, you can maybe get it through, Credit Karma or one of these apps. But when you're using one of those apps, keep in mind that if they're giving you something that's above and beyond what the people are forced to offer you for free, then the way they're making their money is they're selling your data. So let's see if this will work. Double click on that. FTC. Get your free credit report. So see, we're still on the .gov site. So we go to free credit report. Boom. Now they don't actually, like I say, the credit bureaus are private. They'll give you a little bit of information on here about free credit reports. Yeah. Why get a free credit report? So a lot of things we've talked about. And then it's going to direct you to this. Now we're going on to a .com site, but we were directed to it. And you could actually do that phone number and the rest of it, but we're directed to it by the FTC. But again, they're not going to take responsibility for a private site. And here you go. So now you're going on to request your free credit report. And go through the whole deal, fill out the form, no charge. If you're putting in a credit card, something's gone wrong. You're in some pay service. You don't want to be there by mistake. Maybe you want to subscribe to one of those services, but from a personal finance perspective, I think you've failed. You don't need it. So anyway, go through that. Let's get back to this thing. So there are some apps out there that can help you with budgeting. They can look at that credit score. They can do all that stuff. But again, there's no free lunch. They are selling your data, and that's what happens. So identity theft, I touched on this a little bit. It's gonna happen. In crypto, it's really scary because they're the ease and the lack of retribution. You are just out. But in terms of like a credit card type thing, I have credit card issues, mainly identity theft stuff, probably twice a year, but it doesn't cost me anything because you get on it. You do not. That's why you review your credit card statements. Not typically when they come in the mail. You probably most people, for simplicity and usefulness, go paperless. But you should also go onto your account, maybe a couple times a month and just look and just kind of review the charges. And so you're also, kind of doing a reverse budgeting thing here, saying, okay, this is how much I spent. This is how big my bill is. This is how much money I'm going to need to pay it off, because ideally I'm going to pay it off in full that month. But you look at those charges, and if you see some stray thing, then you report it immediately. The more common thing now, because most of these guys, they don't piddle around with a buck here or a buck there. They'll go for a bigger amount, and there'll be some, there's some sort of algorithm, some sort of AI involved here at the credit card companies where they detect suspicious activity, and so they'll send you a note saying, did you authorize this charge? And you reply back and say yes, and then everything's fine. If you reply back and say no, well, that credit card's gone for a little while. They'll send you a thing back saying, okay, we put a hold on that credit card, which means that number is disabled, and they'll have to send you a new card, and they'll typically take care of all those charges. Now, if you let this go on, if the credit card company doesn't catch it and you don't catch it, and about a month has expired, you're more than likely out of luck. What's happened here is that the way credit cards work is there's a few days before the vendor, the merchant, actually gets the money. If you can get within that window, the credit card companies are very happy to deal with you, because they haven't given this vendor the money yet at all. If it's a week or two, they're a little bit more difficult, because now they're having to claw back that money from that merchant. If you let it get beyond a month, they're typically outside of their legal requirement to make this thing good. And so you're going to have some sort of reason, and may not even be able to get your money back. So the key to this thing is timeliness. If you report the theft in a timely manner, you're fine. And that's another advantage about using credit cards. I've got a daughter who's going to school down in she was going to Auburn, so she flew into Atlanta, and she forgot her car keys. Left them, up here. So I blue streaked them down to her, got her the car keys, but in the meantime, I said, just, take a taxi to the hotel right by the airport, and spend the night, and by the morning the package will arrive with the keys. So she does this, and paid for the cab with a credit card. The guy took her like 3 miles and charged her $75. And if it would have been cash, we would have been screwed. But she called me right afterwards and told me what had happened, and so I called the credit card company right then, and they just canceled the charge. That cabbie never got the money, and so you have a bit of a guarantee there. It could have gotten even worse, because it turned out that the guy actually his cab registration in the vendor was in the name of a person had been murdered like the previous year, and some other stuff. So there was all sorts of sketchy stuff going on there. But anyway, my daughter got to the hotel and essentially got a free cab ride rather than a $75 cab ride, because we had used a credit card to pay for it, and were able to get that cleaned up. In Europe, it seems like most of this identity stuff seems to migrate from Europe over to here. I saw so much more in Spain and then places where travel, and it can get pretty. Hopefully, there's a video that I'll try and put in the comments, for comment, and it shows like some of the ATM scams, and it's pretty incredible. Just the level of deceit and everything else that can be out there. Personal costs, yeah. Again, don't let it get to average individual. I don't lose money on identity theft. If you catch it, you're not going to be out the money. Now, if you're one of these, and it won't happen to you for 60 years, but they try to prey upon the elderly, where they can convince them to send them money or provide information, Those are probably the people that are getting ripped off for these larger amounts. But if you're cognizant and aware of phishing attempts and everything else, you're probably not going to be stupid enough to fall for some of these scams. So these guys, again, they're kind of dated. These are all old school tactics where they're looking and statements. Most people go paperless. Most statements now don't have the full account number on them, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time. Skimming, though, is still happens. The electronic means are what happen quite a bit. Pretexting, you get a thing from Alaska, USA, you may or may not have an account. I guess it's now global, but anyway, they send you a thing saying your account's been, you need to respond here. No, skimming is just taking the credit card. I had this happen locally. I was actually down in Eagle River, but you go into a place, they run your credit card, and then they run it again. Or they take your credit card, or they say they lost your credit card. I've had all those different variations, but anyway, they get that data. But again, this is kind of old school physical stealing of information, where a lot of it's done electronically. So phishing, farming, crime rings, yeah. Mailbox, again, I think that's been deterred now since there's just not as much valuable stuff in the mail. All I ever get is junk. And I think most thieves they haven't gotten more honest. They've just gotten frustrated. They've gone on to other ways of stealing. Protecting yourself. Yeah. Again, they're back into all this paper stuff. For you, two-factor authentication with most things will help. And being very vigilant to check your accounts on a regular basis will help. Giving out all your information, though, electronically, and that's why some of these systems, there's a company you may or may not be aware of called Plaid, and it's more of a business-to-business type service. But if you use Venmo, or if you use some of these services that are incredibly useful and I do like, but keep in mind, when you, for example, sign up with Venmo, you are using their third party. I don't think Plaid is actually owned by Venmo, but they may contract for it themselves. But anyway, you put in your bank account information, and then you also put in your PIN and your password. So all that information is out there in the ether. And so when there's a hack to their system, yeah, you can expect some identity theft. Gonna hit you pretty quick. Everything's pretty much secured anymore. My apologies that these guys' stuff is getting a little bit more dated. And the technology, this lecture, not that I'm giving you that much timely information, but it's outdated by the time it's presented to you. They're like computer viruses. They evolve over time, and they're looking for new vulnerabilities. So, but it's a two-edged sword, though. Especially if there's a big move to know your customer type things for any of these financial organizations. They claim it's to fight money laundering, but it's also to fight, it gets back into the central bank digital currencies and some of the other aspects that are sort of the darker side of having all this information out there. Identity theft insurance, not typically. I've been signed up for these things after a data breach with an account that I had, and they usually provide some information that, your account has been breached. Well, it's usually not timely enough to, I've either found out from other sources or it didn't happen. But by the time they send me the report, it's been a bit. Immediate action, though. Contact the police. It's kind of funny. You do have to sometimes get a credit report. I had an old savings account where some cable company, this lady in Florida was paying her cable bill with a direct debit to an old savings account that I no longer had active, and it, obviously there was no money in that account, and so they were trying to come back after me for back charges, for a cable bill, for someplace in Florida. Anyway, I was able to make it all go away just by the fact that I'm not, you got ripped off, but not by me. So anyway, as part of that process, though, I think I did have to spend 15 or 17 bucks to get a police report, and it was a joke. You fill out some paperwork, you stand in line down at the boys at the crime lab did not get involved. No, it was just me walking in there, filling out the form, and the little desk person issuing me a police report number that I faxed off to whoever to make the situation go away and prove that I lived in Alaska and not in Florida. But kind of stupid. These federal agencies are pretty overwhelmed. Creditors who may be impacted, yeah, it is kind of useful if I'm going to, do some extensive travel. It's helpful to get your if you shouldn't have a bunch of stuff in your wallet, but let's say you have a few cards. It's helpful to make maybe a photocopy of that, front and back of those cards, in case, because if your wallet gets stolen, who do you call? How do you get a hold of? They're going to ask you what your number was on your credit card, and you're not going to know any of that because it got stolen with your wallet. So sometimes it's helpful to have a copy of that so you can contact those creditors. Again, you probably will not have to reach out to these guys individually. If you went to that one site, it's going to get farmed out to one of those big three. But having to contact these people directly, I mean, you could, but typically not going to happen in TransUnion. All right. So now managing your credit, the more positive aspects, the reason why we're using credit. So advantages, again, no need to carry cash, free financing, pay for each month. The record keeping advantages. I mean, I'm going back to 2016, and I can tell exactly what my business expenses were, and they're verifiable. Again, the psychology. Yeah, you don't know. Spend beyond your means. Yeah, you can get in trouble with credit as well. We know time value of money. We know how interest rates work. We know how your $2,000 purchase ends up costing, $2,300 10 months later. So 1.5 a month. So yeah, what is that? About 18% or so. Applying for a credit card, easily done, but typically, if you're seeking them out, for some reason, when I was in college, I always wanted to have an American Express card, complete, whatever. It's kind of a vanity card, shows that, oh, I've arrived. Not really. Nobody's impressed by that. And, oh, by the way, American Express, they just about always have an annual fee. And it's not really a credit card because a lot of times they want you to pay in full each month. And it's not a good one to have in your wallet because a lot of times people don't take it because their fees are higher to the vendor, the merchant. So I've been to gas stations before and, I just need to throw some gas in and find out they won't accept the card, the American Express card that I have. So anyway, most people for applying for a credit card, you're just replying back to their credit card offer that they've sent you. But anyway, and in most cases, if they've done that offer, they've already done the credit check. And you will see that when you look at your credit report. You'll notice that, hey, why did that company make an inquiry about me? Income, debt level, current economic conditions. So, yeah, that's on them. They'll either send you the offer or won't send you the offer. And income, they definitely want to know. And they want to know it currently. Even the credit bureau stuff is kind of dated. When you go to, again, Home Depot in this case, and you say I'm making whatever $165,000 a year, and turns out later that you're unemployed, well, you lied, and so they have some recourse. If your credit report says $165,000 a year, well, I didn't put that data in there. I don't know where that came from. Believe me, unless you're making $165,000 a year, it won't show that. But anyway, there are some strategies though. I had some friends who were getting pushed out of the Navy, and the one guy was going to be going to grad school the next year. He's going to go from making reasonable money to essentially nothing in the next couple of years. So he took out all kinds of credit cards just because he knew he wouldn't be in a situation where he'd be getting those offers once they figured out he was essentially unemployed. Some MasterCard, Visa, American Express. Yeah, they have different products. Some require payment in full, not all. Proprietary cards. This used to be a big thing. Just for basically my lower back. I don't want a big, thick wallet that's going to make me sit lopsided wherever I'm at. So most people don't have these credit cards. But if you're somebody who, for example, maybe shops at Kohl's or something like that, where unless you have their credit card, you don't get a good deal. But it depends on your buying habits. But a couple credit cards is nice in case, one happens to physically get broken, or, the strip gets screwed up or something gets screwed up on it. Or if there's some identity theft and they cancel it, you're without a credit card now. That's not good. So when you have some sort of problem with your credit card, keep in mind that here in Alaska, if they say, okay, we'll put one in the mail, well, that could take a while. Most of the time, if you insist on overnight mail, whatever, it depends how good a customer you are, I guess. But every time I request it, and they ship it overnight, so I'm only without a credit card for a day. So it's worth asking for. Credit limit. Yep, overdraft protection, annual fee. So if you're paying an annual fee, make sure there's some sort of reward. I, like most people, have the Alaska Airlines credit card for the free miles, and there is an annual fee associated with it, but there's a benefit to it. If there's no benefit, if you're not using those miles, you have to make the association, and then all these other things with the miles. Keep in mind that miles are not like dollars. A dollar means a certain thing. 50,000 miles from one card, maybe Capital One, might equate to maybe 20,000 on an Alaska Airlines card. They certainly don't go as far. Took 50,000 miles just to get to Seattle one time, which is crazy. On other cards, obviously they vary depending on demand, but the miles are not. It's not some international recognized standard of what a credit card mile is. And these ones where you impress people with your credit card, yeah, you need to get better friends. Anybody who's impressed that you've got that card or this card is, that's kind of shallow. Grace period. You obviously want to take advantage of this grace period. So the period of time between the purchase and when the payment's due. Most credit cards, and again, it's written out in the fine print, but typically if it's within the billing cycle, you have until that billing cycle goes, typically a month, before you start getting charged interest. And you are a convenience user, which is nice. Interest rate, I don't really shop the interest rates because I'm not going to carry a balance. So if you are somebody, you should look at different loan options, because even a low interest rate on a credit card is still pretty horrible. Cash advances. Keep in mind that this grace period does not apply to cash advances. I have had that identity theft where one of the credit card companies actually sent me a physical bill, and they'd always attach these convenience checks. Don't use those, unless there's some extenuating circumstance. What happens is, in this case, somebody did get in my mailbox, and they took one of those and they wrote a check for like $300. So sure enough, shows up my credit card bill, now it's like $320 or something, because they were charging me interest from day one. An advance, it's not like using an ATM. They start charging interest. There is no grace period. And oh, by the way, there's a convenience charge, a cash charge for using the card, or the convenience check, which was 10 or 20 bucks again. So it's a very expensive way to get cash. Don't do that in most cases. Finance charge. So yeah, that's one of the quick things to scam when you're looking at your thing. Make sure those are zeros. If they're not, figure out why. You know, what happened? Were you late with the bill? Did you carry a balance? I'm not going to go through too many of these. I mean, for most better credit cards, they have a number one, don't carry a balance, get it paid off, and so their interest calculating method is not really a concern of mine, but hopefully not of yours. APR, annual percentage rate. So when you're comparing anything in terms of credit, that's a term you need to know, and that's a term you need to see. When they say, oh, get up to this interest rate, there better be an APR behind that number, or it's meaningless. And APR is a legally recognized term. They don't split it up into days or whatever. It's annualized. So it's the way that you compare interest rates is by using APR. And, well, in fact, that's what we say. Comparison amongst lenders. Impact of interest rate. Yeah. Goes without saying. Length of the financing period. Yep. So it's all time value of money. None of this, everything works, both forward and reverse. You're either paying interest or you're making interest. And again, you let the interest get away from you, and it will get away from you. So just key boxes, previous balance should be zero. Purchases, who cares? Cash advances, shouldn't have those. Finance charges, there shouldn't be one. And minimum payment, I don't care. I'm going to pay it all. And again, this is an ideal world. If you can't get the minimum payment, if you're like, oh, I had some emergency, well, now you need to reevaluate your emergency plan in terms of, where your emergency fund is kind of set up. And hopefully that's maybe in a brokerage account or something like that, in a money management account that's maybe making a reasonable amount of interest. And let's say you got $4,000 to $6,000 in there. Not that's not going to be invested typically in stocks or anything else. It's just going to be sitting there in cash, but still earning interest. And that emergency happens. You put it onto the credit card, and now you go to that brokerage account and you transfer that money over and you pay off that balance. And that can all be done within days. And so the necessity for you, if you've got a plan to be carrying a balance, should not exist. These people are still, I guess I'm old school, but I definitely like the phone. It's getting more and more difficult, but the accountability. It's so easy to delete an email. But the good thing about an email is it leaves a record. So that too. On the phone, yeah, there's no record of that call. But the texting and chatting, it takes forever. You spend 75% talking to a bot who keeps directing you to a website like you probably didn't already start out there. It's kind of insulting. But anyway, so Credit Card Act, different things. There's been even more revisions since 2009. But there are regulations on credit cards. If there is some unfair practice, and especially like when you have identity theft, there'll be some identity theft, and you'll call up the credit card agency. Oh, you know what? We're just going to go ahead and take care of that for you because you're such a good customer. They don't necessarily mention that by law we're required to fix those errors, but by law, since you reported the identity theft, in a timely manner, we have to take care of it. So, but anyway, you can let them pretend that they're magnanimous and benevolent and all the rest of it. But yeah, they're doing what they essentially have to do in most cases. But that's why the timeliness is such an issue, because their attitude will definitely change if they're no longer legally obligated to fix the situation. Tips on using credit cards. Pay a credit card before investing money. So as we get further into the thing, we're talking about investing money. But if you've got an investment plan and you're carrying a huge credit card balance, that's illogical. What's happening is you're paying interest, the interest rate that you would love to be able to achieve on an investment. The amount of risk you would have to endure, take to get that interest is a lot. And oh, by the way, if you happen to make money on your investment, it's all going to be taxable. All this interest you're paying, yeah, not even tax deductible if it's on a credit card. So don't do that. Credit repair services, talk to the credit card company themselves. They actually have their own, so to speak, credit repair services, which usually, involve, number one, the association gets together and kind of sets up a nonprofit to provide credit counseling. And what they'll try to get you to do is get your whopping credit card balance and maybe get it converted into a loan at a lower rate that's got fixed payments and the rest of that. They want their money. They don't want you declaring bankruptcy. And potentially they even want you to be a continuing customer after you get your act together, I guess. But if you pay a credit repairer we're gonna get by, and these guys are gonna get nothing out of you. Guess what? Yeah, the credit card company, their position in terms of you owing them money has not been diminished. And oh, by the way, you already got a credit card problem. Well, now you have another bill on your credit card for these credit repair services that you hire to, whatever. So typically don't do that. Tips on using credit cards. Yep. Yeah. Come up with your budget and stick to it. And there's nothing wrong. I mean, having all these things, bills roll onto the credit card, it just has kind of a calming effect, where the monthly, utilities and stuff. Now I just have a single bill just to pay it off, and it's just easier. Although when you have identity theft and your credit card number changes, and now you have to link up all your accounts to the new credit card, it can be a bit of a time suck. But anyway, you end up with a lot of miles doing that. Resolving, different places. Sell assets for cash. Oof. This reduce everyday expenses ought to be at the top. Spend as little as possible. It sounds like you're going from one extreme to the other. You ought to spend for what you need, and then but these people who I know tons of people who they're great people to be around when they've got money, because they won't have it long. But those couple days that they've got cash, they're a lot of fun, and then they're broke. And moderation is just not something that they do. Personal bankruptcy. If you do get in a situation, and a lot of times it don't, I'm not judging here. Most bankruptcies are driven by medical situations, which are completely understandable. In fact, I would hold people more at a lower esteem if they didn't go bankrupt trying to, fix their medical situation or take care of their child or whatever, whoever's got the problem. And so given our messed up medical system, it's not that hard to go bankrupt. I mean, it happens in a hurry. Now, if you are truly at that position, Chapter 7 is the typical bankruptcy, and that's where you go to the judge, and it's a very humbling experience. You show up and you say, I'm not so good with money. I'm not a strong swimmer when it comes to paying my bills, and I need you to take care of it for me. I mean, because literally you are giving up a lot of your freedom, a lot of your assets. You're going to make a list of what you got, and they're going to decide what you get to keep. Yeah, maybe you can have a vehicle, but not that one. You're going to have a lesser one that's just going to get you back and forth to work. But all this other stuff is we may sell it, and you don't get much of a say because you surrendered your assets to pay the debt. You've given up that freedom. Now, Chapter 13 is more interesting. They may be more, okay, you can keep this, you can keep that, because you're going to keep working. This is sort of a wage earner thing. And this may also be used. I saw there were a couple of doctors who invested in real estate down in Florida, and I was with them. I didn't go into the same level they did, but, I kind of hedged my bets and I didn't get clobbered. Well, these two, they were both medical doctors, a couple, and they bought a penthouse. They bought $1 million worth of the top floor of this, condo thing down on Pensacola Beach. And, 2007 happened and they lost it. They sold it at the bottom for, not much more than $100,000 or something. Then they tried to declare bankruptcy. Well, the court laughs at them. They're like, no. And bankruptcy is, you have the means to repay. You are not going to just let, the creditors leave them swinging while you reestablish your life debt-free. So you can ask Chapter 7, request Chapter 7, but they may say, nope, we're giving you Chapter 13. You're gonna get these people repaid. You still may only, well, you don't have any condo at this point, but you still have the bill for that thing, and you're gonna make those people whole. You're gonna pay that off. And so, again, it's not. They make it sound like, oh, just go there and everything's forgiven, everything's wiped off, and you're starting with a clean slate. No, your credit report's going to have a big gaping hole for those 7 years or whatever, where there's, where you're under that bankruptcy. And anyway, it's going to be quite obvious. It's a fairly, it's a permanent problem to a temporary solution. And again, depends what causes your bankruptcy, because you've involved the court, and so the judge can get all judgmental, as they do, and if it looks like you brought this on and it's not some medically related thing, it's just you being stupid, yeah, they're not going to make it pleasant for you. How the credit management fits within your financial plan. So anyway, when should you use credit? There's not a central answer. I mean, a lot of this comes for your own discipline. You need to, it's from you. Credit your thing. What you're going to do, you're going to do a single problem there. But this credit report, don't turn it in. Just make sure you can access it. And go through there and look. And you might find some errors. At least you'll know how to get it. If, like I say, if you're entering your credit card number to get that score, you're screwing up. Something's gone wrong, or you're essentially paying for it. So that's not supposed to be the case. You're supposed to be able to get it for free. In terms of the homework and stuff, don't feel, for those of you who do have access to the book, try and keep up on it to keep more engaged. For people who don't have the book code, again, I apologize for it if I had anything to do with it, which is so frustrating. They keep talking about, oh, get your code from the instructor, that obviously they never gave me. But anyway, you're not that far behind. We can get you out of the hole, and I can, work with you. I got a note from one of the counselors saying the student was considering withdrawing. I think that's, the book's all right, but no, and you'll be fine on the test. Don't worry about that. We'll get this resolved this next week. I just sent out another nasty email to these people, and I think, at some point, the university is somewhere's got to take responsibility and go, wait a minute, our core mission is kind of not happening. We do a lot of other stuff, and it seems like before we do some of that other stuff, maybe we ought to at least be able to make sure we can get textbooks to students. But again, I'll continue to pursue that, but don't panic is what I'm saying. We'll get through this. You'll get through the course, and 5 years from now, you won't even matter. All right. Good luck, and get your report and take a look at it. See if there's anything interesting.